Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about an in-depth examination of sowing to the flesh versus sowing to the spirit. From Romans 8:6, "For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace." Listen while we explore spirit as a demonstrable principle and why divine truth and consciousness heals the sick, reforms the sinner, and raises the dead. In this show, we will explain the difference between thought and divine idea by purifying thoughts from the influence of the corporeal senses. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and reap the benefits of spirit. Swami, the title of today's show is Reaping the Fruit from Spirit. So what do we mean by that?
Yeah, we're learning more and more to use the testimony of our senses to give us clues as to what we are conscious of. The idea of sowing to the flesh versus sowing to the spirit. And we no longer want to just continue to believe in spirit, believing in God. We want to understand spirit is a demonstrable principle, and that divine truth in consciousness heals the sick, reforms sinner, raises the dead. And we'd also would like to look at collectively why we are not doing this. Even though Scripture promises, Jesus says, the things I do, you will do, and even better deeds. And yet today we go to the doctor.
Why do you think that is? We haven't been able to do the deeds that Jesus has performed and shown us.
Well, I think the discovery of Christian Science that Mary Baker Eddy gave humanity has also kind of gone by the wayside in that her biggest fear was that they were going to lose her discovery. And from my experience, or from what I am perceiving today, we're not seeing the type of healing that she was doing anywhere. And the way I come to that conclusion is when she was on the planet, the telephone was just coming out of the ground. The automobile was just coming out of the ground. And people knew all over the world about her healings. Christian Science was global. And today, with communication the way it is, you would think that if there was somebody healing the sick, reforming sinners, raising the dead with scientific certainty, it would be all over the globe. And so the conclusion I've come to is that we simply have lost the principle. I think it's very important for us to understand that the principle is still here. We are just not conscious of it. And I use the analogy of the principle of mathematics. For somebody to say, the principles of mathematics are perfect, therefore my checkbook is perfect, might not necessarily be a true statement. And then there are others who say, my checkbook is not perfect, therefore the principles of mathematics aren't perfect. So just making statements about divine law or divine truth doesn't really go far enough. Just like the principles of mathematics, they must be understood and applied correctly. And the same is true with spirit as a demonstrable principle. It must be understood and applied correctly. And when it is done correctly, it reaps the benefits, just like having a perfectly balanced checkbook.
Well, how would we know if we're not applying these principles correctly? What would that look like?
Well, like the Bible tells us, from the fruits, we use the testimony of our senses. you start to be able to differentiate between when I'm sowing to the flesh, when I believe in matter, when I am accepting the information that's coming through my material senses, and I'm externalizing imperfection, lack, limitation. These are all fruits of the flesh. To substantiate what we're talking about here, we have Galatians 5:18-21 to talk about what it looks like when you're sowing to the flesh. Would you read that for us?
Sure. But if ye be led of the Spirit, ye are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revellings, and such like, of which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. So, Swami, I know we may look at these as behaviors, but I think we have to dig even deeper than that.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. That's one of the downfalls of Orthodox religion, is we look at this type of instruction as regulation of your conduct. Like you say, it's all about your behavior. But we're learning that it's really physics. It's like attracts like, that if we identify with matter, if we believe in matter, if we believe in good and evil, like it said in the beginning there, if ye be led of the Spirit, ye are not under the law. And the law is the law of karma, the belief in two powers. And so if we accept spiritual identity, that's what lifts us up out of the belief in matter, out of the belief in the many, into the understanding of the oneness. Spirit is a demonstrable principle. It's a law. But we must be conscious of it, and the only way we can be conscious of it is by putting off the belief in matter. We can't think that we are a finite mortal being and at the same time be infinite spiritual self.
So the next part in Galatians, that same chapter 5:22-26, now Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit. Could you read that for us?
Yeah, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vain glory, provoking one another, envying one another. End of quote. Now, one of the things that we have been talking about is using what is appearing in your material senses as the check engine light on the dashboard of consciousness. We have to understand, just because things are unfolding seemingly on a positive side, that the physical world is real. That becomes the trap. We have something here from Mary Baker Eddy that I found very helpful in Science and Health, and I'll read it. Nothing we can say or believe regarding matter is immortal, for matter is temporal and is therefore a mortal phenomena, a human concept, sometimes beautiful, always erroneous. That's from Science and Health, page 277. All the good, beautiful, and true attributes belong to the divine truth, but by the same token, they're not real. So we use what is appearing in our senses as a barometer, as a means of understanding, what am I conscious of? Am I conscious of the false human mental material recreation, or am I conscious of the truth, the divine creation, the perfection of being?
Well, I have a question on that second verse that you had recited from Galatians. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So what do you think Paul means by living in the Spirit and walking in the Spirit?
Yeah, for me, the way that I understand this is in yoga, we use the term purity. Purity in yoga is not just conforming to the values that we're talking about here, but it also is the ability to think, feel, say, and do one in the same thing. Oftentimes, people will say one thing, and then you'll notice they do something completely different. And chances are, if you really analyze it, they probably feel something alien to the two above. This is what we call being impure or scattered. And so a big part of being able to be conscious of divine truth is starting out with this idea of mind control, being able to control how you're thinking. One of the reasons why I really like the Kriya Yoga that we teach, pranayama, the relationship between thought and breath, in order for us to get a handle on how to control how we're thinking. Then at the same time, we have to understand there are modes of thinking. In her book, Science and Health, Mary Baker Eddy makes reference to 3 modes of mortal thought. In Revelations in the Bible, they talk about the dragon and 2 beasts. In astrology, we use the mutable signs. Gemini, the lower mind, Virgo, the mid-mind, Sagittarius, the higher mind, and then finally Pisces is divine mind. Like we said in the opening, there's a difference between thoughts and ideas. There's a difference between thinking and knowing. We think with our material senses, which work on polarization, they work on division, they work in contrast. They work in the mental, material concept of the divine creation, which works in the absolute. And so we learn to stop thinking with our material senses, but at the same time, we want to start to activate our spiritual senses. In Revelations, they talk about, and to the angel of the church, write. There's instruction here to do something. We want to make our mind an avenue of awareness for the presence of divine mind. In silence and in stillness, we watch, we wait, we listen, we let divine truth fill our consciousness. And in that silence and stillness, divine mind will resolve things into thoughts. It exchanges the objects of sense for the divine idea. And the way we're socialized is to think positively. Emit your positive thoughts with the belief, gives it the power of intention. But all of this keeps us in duality, in that divided consciousness, in that mind that can't bring forth the divine image. So here we're learning if we sow to the flesh, we're in duality. But if we sow to the spirit, we're in unity. We're in the absolute. We're out of time, space, concept, belief, thinking, human will, personal sense. That's a very different mode of operation that we need to be able to demonstrate with scientific certainty.
So again from Galatians, the line that says, "And they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh." Could you maybe let us know what that symbolizes?
Yeah, here we're coming back to apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine, these 3 phases in development. In Christianity, we have the crucifixion of the body, the resurrection of the Son, the reunion with the Father. The hero's journey was the separation, the journey, the return. The process of unfolding, where we're going from unconscious awareness to self-conscious awareness to superconscious awareness, it does have an evidence procedure. We have to start by putting off this false sense of existence.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor, so listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So I'd like to get back to the fruit of the Spirit from the Galatians verse 22. And have a curiosity, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. How do we know when we are showing those fruits that we are in the Spirit, or if that's just good human behavior?
Yeah, I think in Revelations they talk about this as looks like a lamb, speaks like a dragon. You're getting good results, but you're still under the law of karma. You still have a belief in two powers. You think that you are a finite mortal human being. Symbolically speaking, we haven't resurrected, transformed. We haven't come out of the belief in mortality, given up the belief in matter. And so until we are willing to do that, until we are willing to become whole and let go of the false sense of self, we will continue to be in this cycle of death and rebirth, to swing from finite bad to finite good, and then maybe eventually back to finite bad. But in Revelation, when we realize the truth, there is but one life. And it's perfect, it's changeless, it's eternal, and it's the only life I am. You're now above karmic law. Spirit is a demonstrable principle. But one of the biggest pitfalls in spiritual practice or spiritual revelation is what in yoga they call avidya. In the Bible they call it sin. We're missing the mark. We're identifying this false sense of self, the mental concept, but we think we're in the truth of being. And so when you take healing off the table, you're left with a concept, a theory, a belief about something. But if you go the next octave, if you start to prove the presence of your understanding of this divine truth, then you're no longer working at the limitations of a belief level, which is the same level as the human experience. You rise above it. Mary Baker Eddy suggests we live above corporeal sense and correct it.
So speaking of correcting it, went to the beach the other day and I made a comment about what a beautiful day it is. The sun was shining on the ocean. It looked like diamonds reflecting off the waves because of the light and the sunshine. And then you were talking that was still a human concept of what I was looking at. So even though it was a beautiful day, how could I have better described what it was I was looking at?
Yeah, this is what Mary Baker Eddy wrote in Science and Health. The whole idea of nothing we can say or believe regarding matter is immortal, for matter is temporal and is therefore a mortal phenomena, a human concept, sometimes beautiful, always erroneous. That's the end of the quote. And the idea for us to maintain this level of awareness for what is appearing in our senses is not that it is not there, it's a reflection. It is a thought about what is really here. We want to start to pierce through the appearance and sow to the spirit the changeless state of being, which is the source of what is appearing in your material senses. So the unreality isn't that it isn't there. When you're experiencing a beautiful day and at the same time you are conscious of the divine truth underneath it, then you're upholding a principle, which is very different when life is happening to you. From the material perspective, the sun is rising outside of yourself. But from the spiritual perspective, it is the sun rising within your consciousness. As we start to raise our identity out of the finite mortal location of a physical body into a larger, infinite spiritual sense of self, where things are no longer external to myself, but again, everything is within your consciousness. Your identity has expanded, and we're graduating from the victim where things are happening to us into the position of the creator, the divine principle.
So when she says sometimes beautiful, always erroneous, why is our human concept always erroneous?
Matter isn't real. Matter is a thought. It's a concept. The only thing that is real is spirit, the absolute, the one perfect divine life. And the idea of sin is really when we think matter is real, when you think you have a physical body with an expiration date that has needs. And until you are willing to give that up, ready to accept you are the creative principle of this universe right here and right now, you will continue to return to this cycle of death and rebirth.
So I'm surmising that erroneous means error, and the reason why our human concepts are error is because it's not real.
Right. It's not there. It's a reflection. Just use a mirror. Stand in front of a mirror. And what you're looking at, which is looking back out at you, you can honestly say there's no life, truth, intelligence, or substance in that reflection. That's the same relationship we have between what is appearing as a mortal physical being and the divine idea. Only it is the divine idea which is the real, the true. And as long as we accept the finite mortal being as being real, we're in the trap.
Well, I think we have something from Hebrews, Paul, and he talks about substance. Can you read that for us?
Yeah, I have these notes here, and they're primarily to help us understand the process, the idea of what Paul calls faith. I'll read Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's the end of the quote. And I also have something here from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, Mary Baker Eddy. Until belief becomes faith, and the faith becomes spiritual understanding, human thought has little relation to the actual or divine. End of quote. Yeah, this is what I really like about Mary Baker Eddy's work. She puts healing on the table. She tells us if we cannot heal, we do not know ourselves spiritually. In fact, somewhere in her writing, she says, "Felt ye the power of the word?" And so unless we are really using healing to help us prove our declarations of being spiritual, chances are we're working with a concept, and the concept can be oversimplifying spiritual truth or overcomplicating it, and these become the extremes that we face. So what does it look like when I'm conscious of divine truth? And according to these teachings, unless you're healing the sick, reforming the sinner, raising the dead, you are unconscious to the truth, which then may mean you are either oversimplifying or overcomplicating the truth, but you don't know the truth. My guess is oversimplification. We have a tendency to say things without understanding the whole truth. We declare that I'm spiritually awakened, but I'm not healing the sick, reforming sinners, or raising the dead. And so, like Mary Baker Eddy says, you haven't felt the power of the word. So we start with belief, but we must believe in the allness of the perfection of being. The divine creation, divine truth must be perfect. It can't be a mix of good and evil. You need a principle. Spirit, when understood, becomes a law. But if you don't understand spirit correctly, if you do not know God aright, there's another possible reason why you're not demonstrating divine law with scientific certainty. Your belief graduates to faith when you're starting to see the fruits of the Spirit in what you're believing in. If you are maintaining conscious awareness of divine truth, if you are a faithful witness to the divine creation, it must start to have an effect on your external appearances. And that's what Mary Baker Eddy meant. Live above corporeal sense. Keep your mind in constant relation with the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence, and you correct what is appearing in your senses. Now you're at the level of faith. As you start to master that and you become more proficient with knowing this truth, then your faith will then graduate into understanding.
So, getting back to the fruit of the Spirit, I see we have some writings here by Mary Baker Eddy. Would be appropriate at this time.
Yeah, again, the value of using the testimony of the senses to reveal the fruit of the Spirit. Mary Baker Eddy wrote in Unity of Good, and I'll read it. Nevertheless, though I thus speak, and from my heart of hearts, it is due both to Christian Science and myself to make also the following statement. When I have most clearly seen and most sensibly felt that the infinite recognizes no disease, this has not separated me from God, but has so bound me to Him as to enable me instantaneously to heal a cancer which had eaten its way to the jugular vein. In the same spiritual condition, I have been able to replace dislocated joints and raise the dying to instantaneous health. People are now living who can bear witness to these cures. Herein is my evidence from on high that the views here promulgated on the subject are correct. Certain self-proved propositions pour into my waiting thought in connection with these experiences. And here is one such conviction, that an acknowledgement of the perfection of the infinite unseen confers a power nothing else can. An incontestable point in divine science is that because God is all, a realization of this fact dispels even the sense or consciousness of sin and brings us nearer to God, bringing out the highest phenomena of the all-mind. End of quote. Practice makes perfect is only true when practice is perfect. Mary Baker Eddy, after 3 or sometimes 4 classes, she would send her students out to heal people. And these students, after 3 or 4 classes, were coming back healing things like blindness, deafness. We're not talking about just fixing a bad mood. My experience has been you can't find this today, and there must be a reason. And the main reason, I think, is, first of all, we're either using the mind that can't bring forth the divine image, or we think we're spiritual.
Well, we're going to start breaking down our show for today, so listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On the homepage, you see the fading banner Blog Talk Radio. Click it, directs you to its catalog page. Click the Products tab and Online Classes, directs you all the classes that Swami has available. Any final thoughts?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and reap the benefits of spirit. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I'm Lisa Winton, with me, Kenny Toy, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.